cryptoeconomics, from the theory to the practice to examples of what we've built to some kind of a vision that we have, what could happen in the next year, 2, 5, 10, you know. But this all it seems quite broad. So about a year ago, before FCC, we decided at one point that it would be good, given that it's not just a question of Kleros as a product, it's also a question of this nascent field of decentralized justice, to attempt to somehow compile knowledge that both from what we've been reading, from what we've been learning from, and also what we've been building, to sort of compile all of that into one book that we can share around freely for people to read, to learn more, to give us more feedback about whether they agree or don't agree with us, to accept all criticism, because what we're trying to build is something that is a common good at the very end. It's not something that is just a firm, just a product. It's not a matter of an ecosystem. It's something that should be a substantial change. So by thinking about that, we came up with this, the book called Dispute Revolution. Now, I'll just go briefly through this, and you'll see that it sort of echoes in some ways what we've been speaking about today, but also it adds up some other elements that might be quite interesting to read because they give more context. For example, myself, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a computer scientist, I studied humanities. For me, maths is just, the first half of this entire event was quite strange to me. You know, the moment when numbers leave the room and letters come in maths, that's the moment when I just, you know, I can't follow anymore. So pretty much when we were trying to compile the book, we went like this. Where do we start? We start with history. There are two foundational aspects to Kleros with regards to kind of a historic overlook. One is the Greek lotteries. Some of you might know, I mean, I didn't know before I actually started researching it much more deeply, is that during the period of the Athenian Republic, one of the ways that their court system functioned was based on the Kleroterion. This is, of course, one of the reasons why our project is actually, our platform is named Kleros. And we wanted to reach out to people who are actually true experts on this topic. One of them was Josiah Ober from Stanford University, who is one of the, I think, most interesting people that I've had the chance to listen and to talk to, who's actually not just a historian. He's not just thinking about Greek democracy as, you know, this kind of a thing that happened as some kind of an a historical artifact. But it's also talking about Greek democracy, something that's a very living, thriving thing, because him and his colleagues at this point are trying to develop not just sort of Athenian democracy as a part of political history, but also trying to sort of reinvent political economics, something that has been sort of thrown aside, because looking at the way that ancient Athens worked, it is something that we can find many comparisons to the modern world. And I think this is a very interesting interview to read. The second sort of foundational aspect in this way is the law merchant of the Middle Ages, where at one point it was a question of how to protect these trade fairs, where people would come, traders would come from different countries, well, there weren't countries back then, but different regions, and attempted to sort of, you know, trade. And how would you protect people who are coming from abroad? And this is how some of the first aspects of private justice in the Middle Ages were actually established. And one of the key experts in this topic globally is Professor Barry Weingast. So we also had a very interesting chat with him regarding the topic, and I think it's also, there's a lot of hidden wisdom in there. Of course, the second chapter of our book covers what we've talked about extensively today, our crypto economics, and how pretty much first of all, where it all derives from, and second of all, what we've actually done with it, what we've been developing, what we've been researching. Of course, we've already seen these two gentlemen today. One of the things where we start is actually game theory, and how actually game theory became practice from something that was a theoretical discussion somewhere in the 1940s, where they were trying to develop theoretical models of aerial combat, dogfights, and tank battles and ship battles, how they took this model and actually completely transferred it to another level, and it actually, how far it echoed from Morgenstern and Neumann in 1940 to Schelling in the 50s till to Clermont-Lesage today. Of course, one of the things that we also like to think about is, we like to think, in Kleros, we like to think in an adversarial way. We always try to think about all of the weak points that we have, and one of the articles that is very interesting to read inside of the book, this, I don't know if some of you know, this is from the famous movie, The 12 Angry Men, right? When pretty much a man is going to be convicted by 11 jurors that he's just, he's going to die, he's going to the electrical chair. And then one of the jurors, who is sort of suspicious about what happened, manages to overturn this entire thing. Now, of course, we think about our own system in a critical way, because it is also a question of legal systems. Okay, so, can you remove bias completely? No, you can't. There's no legal system on planet Earth because we as humans are prone to bias. So there's always an element of bias in everything. So this actually relates to the question that we also referred to before regarding values, and whether Kleros can be actually a system that is going to decide on very complex issues. So, for example, death penalties. We doubt that can actually happen. So this sort of clarifies exactly that question. Furthermore, we did a very interesting interview with Professor Eyal Winter from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, who is one of the key proponents of game theory and the application of game theory in justice systems. And there's a wonderful quote by him that I very much enjoyed, because this was a year ago. This was pretty much before our T2CR, our first platform, actually launched. And when we were discussing that last winter with him, he said at one point, the first thing that we need to do is sort of convince people not to be disgusted by game theory. Because very often game theory is seen as this kind of a thing that sort of dehumanizes humans. They try to model human behavior. So this is actually a very interesting take on that. Furthermore, the entire third chapter pretty much just goes very deeply. A lot of it was written by my colleague Wiliam, who is a crypto-economics researcher, about everything that we've done. Very deep insights into our first experiment, Doges on Trial, that went pretty well. Actually went, I have to say, conservatively saying pretty well. And also everything that we've managed to learn from that before we launched our T2CR. The fourth chapter deals pretty much with more of a theoretical discussion on how, sort of trying to create a little bit of foresight. It's not futurism. We're not talking about 100 years from now. We're talking about foresight, some 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we were talking with people who are in the field, who are doing some groundbreaking research, and who also shared not just their insights, but also their worries, their suspicions about how things are going to move forward. In front, one of them is, of course, Kate Sills from Agoric, Primavera de Filippi, who is working at CNRS at Harvard University. Of course, our fellow Dimitri Narozhny, who was working at that point, who was working on the basic question, is Kleros legal? Of course, from this paper that he did, he actually developed an entire report where he was actually talking about not just legality, but also legality, legitimacy, and fairness within Kleros. And of course, last but not least, there's Gillian Hatfield, who is pretty much, for those who know, Gillian Hatfield is one of the greatest figures in the concept of these new aspects of development of modern contemporary justice systems. And of course, there's one thing that I kind of like the most about Kleros, and this is what we were discussing. For example, you mentioned Texas at one point, and there was Texas, there was San Francisco. However, one thing for me, I was born and I live in Serbia. Now, when we think about justice systems, very often in these novel concepts, and of course dispute resolution mechanisms in practice, we think of them in contemporary advanced societies, developed societies. all right, it can be a nice addition. You know, yeah, Uber Eats, sure, you can solve a dispute. But for us in Serbia, it's a completely different ballgame. And this is a very interesting interview that I did with Alice Namuli, who is from Uganda, who actually told us the story that, for example, between Uganda and Kenya, there is a very developed system of exchange of goods and services that are all paid in Bitcoin. And this has been happening ever since 2014, and it's been expanding rapidly. Nigeria is also one of these places, because places like Kenya and Uganda have had for years conflicts where it was pretty much impossible to transfer goods, to transfer funds. And now she even makes an example that if you want to send $1,000 to Japan from Uganda, it will take you around 3 to 6 months to get that. And with Bitcoin, you can do it pretty much now. So even thinking about dispute resolution mechanisms and these freelancing examples that we were talking about, trust me, in Serbia, without Kleros, there is absolutely no way of resolving that. Absolutely none. Because, you know, our justice system doesn't even know internet. They're not aware of, you know, how things work online and whatever that means. The devil lives there. So I would recommend reading that as well.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You know what the backlog in Italy is?
Sorry?
In Italy, the backlog in the courts, 112 years.
Absolutely, I know. It's Southern Europe. It's the Mediterranean. Yeah. I come from there. It's a wonderful place. Beautiful sun, beautiful people, great food, fantastic stuff. What you gonna do? Also, you know that Italy is one of the places that had the most, dethroning of the parliament in history of all republics. All governments in the world. For example, they had, I think, in like 40-something years, they had 56 governments that were deplaced. So, well, you know, the thing is that it's a thriving republic. So it's a very dynamic political scene. And of course, yes, I would just move back here. And the last chapter covers the business, which is very important. And of course, here we have people like Colin Rule, who we're discussing. Now, this was the first version. This came out around a year ago. And yeah, of course, sorry, there was also the 6th chapter, which is what Fede was talking about around a couple of minutes ago, discussing the applications, pretty much our ecosystem, and what we envisage as, you know, Kleros as a layer 2 solution. Now, we're coming out this year with a new augmented, improved version where we delve even deeper into what we've been researching, what we've been doing for the past year. There's an interesting article that was written by Federico where he actually starts dabbling in something that is an issue, and that is how to govern DAOs at this point, and how Kleros might be, in some kind of theoretical way, seen as a court, as a supreme court for the DAOs. Of course, this is a sort of a colorful name for the article, but at the very end, it sort of delves deeper into this topic. One thing that Wiliam was talking about Kleros and social choice theory, of course, in this image, I guess you know who that is, Alice in Wonderland. And of course, what Alice in Wonderland has to do with social choice theory, read the book and you'll see it's pretty fun. No, actually, it's even a much more interesting story. Even I didn't know about this, so it's fantastic. Of course, Sophie Nappert was writing about the rise of algocracy, which is also a new term that I've managed to learn in the past couple of months. And as the rise of algorithms as sort of decision-making protocols that decide our own fates, now in some kind of a minor way, but it's growing, and how humans somehow need to find some kind of response to this. Furthermore, because a year passed and we now already have several products that are working, we already have several things that are happening in parallel, we sort of compiled everything that we've learned in the past year about what we've been doing, what we've been building. So that's also there. One interesting experiment that we did that we didn't mention here is that we used one of the sort of breaking point examples in our experiments, because, you know, we did the experiment with the Doges and everything. We compared our own jurors to artificial intelligence, and actually we started exploring a little bit, you know, this exact bridge between artificial intelligence and collective intelligence. There's also some interesting stuff about that here. We have, again, a complete fresh look at everything that we built, not just as our findings, our research findings, but also our reviews of what we did. And of course, announcements of some new things that will be coming out. For me, one of the most interesting ones is the Linguo. The Linguo will be sort of a translation app where you can actually post your translations to be translated. I work as a translator as a side gig, and I'm going to start using that pretty fast, because getting good translations fast and efficiently is not an easy task, and translation is very hard work. And I think that having some kind of a transparent way of reviewing translations can be actually very effective, because first of all, looking at myself, very often when you finish some kind of a text, you're not really sure that it's done. So it's actually very good to have more eyes on it. And our book will be probably coming out early April, the second version. This version you can find on our website. You can download it for free. You can read it at your own leisure. It's in different formats. So this is pretty much it for our conference today. Again, whatever you've missed, you can find pretty much there. And I would thank you for your participation, and I would invite all of you to join us for a cocktail, for a little bit of refreshment, and a little bit of unwinding, and we can continue discussing about everything that we've heard today. Thank you very much.